It was supposed to be a new beginning for the Lambert family. The grand, old house stood proudly at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street, its Victorian facade whispering stories of past eras. Josh and Renee Lambert, along with their 3 children, saw it as the perfect place to settle down and make memories. Yet, even in those first moments, there was a sense of something watching, a feeling that the walls harbored secrets not easily shared. It started with small, almost dismissible things, a misplaced book, creaking floorboards late at night. Renee, an artist with a keen eye, noticed the subtle shifts more than anyone. A shadow where none should be, the sensation of a chill even on warm evenings. "It's an old house," Josh would say, his voice dismissive but his eyes unable to mask a growing unease. But Renee knew better. The silence that fell at night was not the peaceful stillness they hoped for, it was a silence that listened. One evening, as dusk painted the sky a deep, blood-red hue, Renee sat at her piano, fingers grazing the keys in a haunting melody. It was then she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, as if the house itself was breathing. Startled, she turned, expecting to see one of the children, but the room was empty, the only sound now the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. The true descent began when Dalton, their eldest son, mentioned the man with the hollow eyes. At first, Josh and Renee dismissed it as a bad dream, the kind children have when they're adjusting to a new place. But Dalton's demeanor shifted, he became quieter, his once bright eyes dulled as if weighed down by something unseen. One morning, after failing to wake him for school, they found Dalton unresponsive, lying in bed with a pale face and eyes closed, yet unmarked by illness. The doctors were baffled. No diagnosis, no explanation, Dalton was simply gone, trapped in a coma that defied reason. Fear seeped into their home like a slow-moving fog, curling into every corner. Strange occurrences intensified. Lights flickered without cause, whispers echoed through the halls, and Renee began to feel a cold hand brush her arm in the dark. Josh, a skeptic by nature, struggled to keep reality from slipping. His wife's insistence that they were not alone gnawed at him, especially when he started hearing faint cries coming from rooms that were empty. One night, unable to sleep, Josh wandered through the house. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight, each step amplifying the silence around him. Just as he reached the end of the hallway, a chill washed over him, and he saw it, a fleeting figure in the dim reflection of the hallway mirror, watching him with eyes as hollow as his son's sleep. Days turned into weeks, and the Lamberts' once hopeful home now seemed cloaked in perpetual twilight. Renee's exhaustion grew, the shadows under her eyes darkening with every sleepless night. Josh, too, felt the weight pressing on him, though he tried to hide it behind tired reassurances. "It's stress," he muttered, more to himself than to Renee. But neither of them could deny that something had taken root in their home, a presence that grew bolder as the sun dipped below the horizon. The nights were the worst. The creaks and groans of the house, once easy to explain as the natural settling of wood and stone, now felt purposeful, as if the walls themselves conspired against them. Renee's dreams, when she managed to drift into uneasy sleep, were plagued with visions of figures standing at the foot of her bed, silent, immobile, their eyes pools of black that seemed to draw her in. She would wake up gasping, heart-pounding, to the relentless quiet that seemed almost louder than any sound. Josh's skepticism started to crack one evening when he stayed up late, his eyes fixed on an old photograph album. A sudden thud from Dalton's room snapped him from his reverie, sending him sprinting up the stairs. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a room drenched in moonlight and shadow. Dalton lay as he always did, unmoving, his breathing steady but shallow. But as Josh backed away, he swore he saw a shape in the corner shift, a shadow that melted seamlessly into the wall. They called in experts, paranormal investigators who spoke of residual energy and spirit manifestations. One, a woman named Elise, carried a strange air of certainty. With eyes sharp and wide, she examined the house with measured steps, pausing in rooms where the air grew thick and stale. "This is more than just a haunting," she finally said, voice low. "There is a door between worlds here, and something has crossed through." Renee's mind raced. Memories resurfaced, Dalton's whispers of a man with hollow eyes, her own glimpses of dark figures in the mirror. Elisa's revelation sent chills through her veins. The house was not just haunted, it was a gateway, a thin place where the boundary between the living and the dead barely existed. And Dalton, poor Dalton, had somehow slipped through it. Elisa's team set up cameras and sensors throughout the house. They spoke in hushed tones about the further, a realm beyond the physical world where restless spirits and dark entities roamed. It was there, Elise believed, that Dalton's essence was trapped, unable to find its way back. The sensors began to flash and beep, picking up movements that no one could see, faint heat signatures that defied reason. Then came the night of the séance, an event etched into Renee's memory with terrifying clarity. The room was lit by a single, flickering candle. Elise sat at the center, her hands resting on the table, eyes shut in concentration. The team circled around, holding their breath. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft rustle of the candle's flame. And then, the whispers started. They were faint at first, overlapping and chaotic. Renee's heart pounded in her chest as she strained to understand the words. Suddenly, Elisa's body jerked, her eyes snapping open wide but unseeing. "He's lost in the dark," she said, her voice layered with another, deeper tone. The room grew colder, the flame shivering before stretching impossibly high, casting wild, jagged shadows on the walls. Josh reached for Renee's hand, squeezing tightly as a voice echoed through the room, deep and resonant, "Leave, or you will join him." The candle extinguished, plunging them into darkness so complete it felt suffocating. A crash sounded from upstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of Dalton's voice calling out, weak and frightened. "Mom?" Renee's breath hitched as tears welled in her eyes. It was the first time she had heard his voice since he fell into the coma. But there was no relief, only terror at what else might be lurking just beyond the veil. With Dalton's voice still echoing in her ears, Renee rushed to the stairs, but Elise held her back with surprising strength. "It's not him," Elise warned, her eyes wide with urgency. "Not yet." The weight of her words settled in the air like a suffocating fog. Renee's mind raced as she grappled with the truth. Whatever had reached out from the darkness was not her son, it was something wearing his voice like a mask. Elise gathered the team and began preparations for what she called the journey into the further. Josh listened in stunned silence as she explained the plan, a trance-like state where the boundary between their world and the realm beyond could be crossed. It was a dangerous gamble, but if they were to bring Dalton back, it was their only option. The team set up in Dalton's room, now an impromptu war room against whatever forces they were about to challenge. Shadows flickered and stretched across the walls, as if mocking their resolve. Josh sat in the center, eyes shut, breath steady. Elisa's voice guided him, soft and rhythmic, urging him to drift away from the physical, to step past the boundary where most souls dared not go. The room around him seemed to fade, the warmth of Renee's hand slipping from his grasp. Darkness enveloped him, cool and silent, until he opened his eyes to a place that was both familiar and grotesquely altered. The further stretched out in all directions, a twisted reflection of their home. The rooms were shrouded in an unnatural fog, and the air buzzed with an eerie static. It felt as though the very walls hummed with voices trapped in a continuous loop of anguish. Shadows darted across his vision, ghostly figures with eyes hollow and dark. Their whispers grew louder as Josh moved deeper, calling his name, their words mingling with faint cries for help. "Dalton!" Josh's voice was swallowed by the void, echoing back at him like a mockery. As he pushed forward, he felt a presence behind him, heavy, malevolent, and patient. He turned slowly, pulse thundering in his ears. There, partially obscured by the fog, stood the figure Dalton had described, the man with hollow eyes. His grin was wide, unnaturally so, and his eyes were two pits of infinite darkness. Fear threatened to paralyze him, but a flicker of movement to his right drew his attention. It was Dalton, bound and shivering, eyes wide with terror. Josh's heart leapt as he moved towards his son, but the space between them seemed to stretch impossibly, the distance refusing to close. The man with hollow eyes shifted, stepping into the dim light, revealing a tattered suit and a shadow that moved independently, slithering across the floor like a living thing. "He doesn't belong here," the figure hissed, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Josh felt the temperature drop, frost forming in the corners of his vision. "You don't belong here," it whispered again, this time inches from his ear. He whipped around, but nothing was there, only the suffocating void and Dalton's terrified eyes. A sudden rush of courage surged within Josh, fueled by the sight of his son's trembling form. He lunged forward, breaking through the unseen force that kept them apart. His hands gripped Dalton's, and the boy's eyes, once filled with hopelessness, brightened with recognition. "Dad," Dalton gasped, his voice weak but real. Relief was short-lived as the man with hollow eyes let out a guttural, inhuman roar, the walls around them vibrating with the sound. The room back in the physical world shook. Renai clutched Elisa's hand as the air thickened, the team's equipment sparking with erratic energy. Elisa's eyes fluttered, her voice straining to maintain the tether that kept Josh connected. "Bring him back," she whispered, sweat beading on her brow. Josh, now clinging to Dalton, felt a force pulling at them, stronger than anything he had known, trying to drag them back into the depths of the further. A final scream echoed, piercing and raw, as Josh closed his eyes and focused on Renai's voice in the distance. He pulled Dalton close, their surroundings blurring as a sensation like falling overtook them. The man's howl faded, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed as if the universe itself held its breath. When Josh opened his eyes, they were back in Dalton's room, the cold presence replaced by warmth and light. Dalton stirred, his small fingers squeezing Josh's hand. The haunting, for a moment, seemed over, but Josh knew the further was always watching, waiting for its next chance to break through. The relief that flooded the Lambert household was palpable. Dalton was awake, his eyes, though weary, alive with recognition and gratitude. The house, once a labyrinth of whispered fears and unseen presences, now seemed to breathe easier, as if it, too, had survived a great ordeal. But the reprieve was short-lived. Renai, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle shifts, flickering shadows that shouldn't exist, cold drafts on warm evenings. The house, she knew, was not entirely free from the grip of the further. Elise, sensing the unfinished nature of their battle, returned a week later. Her presence alone was a reminder of the dangers they had faced, her eyes holding the weight of countless encounters with the unknown. "The door isn't closed," she told Josh and Renai as they sat in the dim glow of the living room. "It's been opened once, and now it remembers. The spirits know the way." Josh's jaw tightened, the specter of fear reawakening within him. Dalton, listening from the doorway, shivered at the thought, his memories of the dark realm still vivid and raw. The house creaked as if acknowledging Elisa's words, a deep groan that resonated through its wooden frame. That night, as the family settled into uneasy sleep, the silence carried an edge, a breath held in anticipation. Renai awoke to the sound of footsteps, not the familiar shuffle of her children's feet, but a slow, deliberate tread that stopped just outside their bedroom door. The doorknob rattled, and then, nothing. The air seemed to hum with a silent threat, a reminder that the Lambert family was still very much within reach of something unseen. Dalton, in his own room, dreamed of the further once more. The fog, the hollow-eyed man, the sense of being watched, it all returned with suffocating clarity. But this time, he was not alone. A shadow moved with purpose, drawing closer. He awoke with a start, the echo of a whisper fading from his mind, "We are not finished." He sat up, heart pounding, to see a figure at the foot of his bed. For a moment, terror gripped him before the figure melted into the darkness, leaving only the cold imprint of eyes that did not blink. Elise called for another seance, this time with a more determined purpose. They would not merely visit the further, they would seal it off, closing the pathway that had allowed the haunting to bleed into their world. The air in the house felt heavier that evening, charged with a strange energy that made the hair on the back of Renai's neck stand up. Elisa's voice cut through the silence, guiding them into that familiar trance, her words weaving a bridge between the living and the dead. Josh found himself drifting once more, the light of his world fading as he stepped into the further. The shadows were alive here, shifting and writhing like a living tapestry of sorrow. This time, however, he was prepared. The echoes of Dalton's cries had led him before, but now he sought the source, the place where the man with hollow eyes waited. The figure appeared, a grotesque smile splitting its face as it welcomed him. "You came back," it rasped, a chorus of voices woven into one. Josh felt the chill deepen as he stepped forward. "This ends now," he said, his voice steady but the tremor in his hands betraying his fear. The shadow moved, the room shaking as if in protest. Elise's voice echoed faintly in his ears, reminding him that he was tethered, that he could return. He reached into the darkness, feeling it bite back, icy and unrelenting. A force pushed against him, a battle of will and presence. And then, just as it seemed the darkness would consume him, a light, a warm, golden glow, spread through the further. Dalton appeared, his small hand grasping Josh's, his face set with the determination only a child could possess. Together, they pushed back, the figure's form flickering and dissolving as the light grew. The cold receded, the whispers silenced, and the oppressive weight lifted. Josh felt himself being pulled back, away from the further, the light dimming as he returned to the living world. When he opened his eyes, Elise was slumped, exhausted but smiling. "It's done," she whispered. The house sighed, a long, deep breath that seemed to release years of tension. Renee embraced Josh, her tears warm against his cheek, and Dalton clung to them both. The door had been closed, not without cost, but it was sealed, at least for now. The Lamberts knew that the scars of their experience would remain, faint echoes in the corners of the house and the memories that would never truly fade. But they also knew they had faced the darkness together, emerging into the light that, though fragile, was theirs once more. And as the dawn painted the sky, the shadows retreated, leaving the house in peace, if only until the next whisper dared to break through.